I guess it's quite radical in the sense that there's a wonderful side which is it works nearly on a 3-year circle. And you've got 1 year where you're pretty much by yourself, writing and eating, food for the brain, and just reading and maybe going out a tiny bit to go to museums and stuff, but really kind of taking it all in. Then there's a year where you start mingling with other people because you're starting to look for, all the wonderful people or not that you're going to be able to work with. And so you become slightly more social. And that year normally ends with the release of the album, suddenly extremely social, doing lots of press all day long and meeting loads of people. And then the third year is on the roads and on tour, where suddenly you're living with 10 people in a bus. So you get to a kind of high level of no intimacy whatsoever. And the wonderful thrill of being on stage and meeting people and a kind of generosity of giving all that you can and receiving lots of love. And then back to square one. Back to being by yourself in the house, reading and writing. And so it's a funny kind of 3-year circle.
So you really have to set aside time to do the writing. It's not something you can do on the road. Do you keep journals?
I keep journals, and I tend to start writing on the road just to have a starting point, to not have that terrifying moment where already, you get into, especially that this year it's going to change, but I used to release albums every time in October, November, which meant that I would end touring with the summer festivals. So you do start believing that you're someone really, really important when you've got 60,000 people singing along with you and screaming your name. So when you go back home, the level of loneliness is insane. You kind of walk around the street thinking, why are people not clapping? Why are they not all screaming my name? And so you get a massive down from that. But joke put aside, it's good to have a starting point. Otherwise, it's funny because you never really understand how you do write a song. And so you tend to forget. And suddenly, if you haven't got one coming naturally, you get terrified by the idea of thinking, what can I do now? Have I already done this? Is this starting to become like an automatic thing that is maybe lacking emotion or, lacking reality? So, and at the same time, you can't really force yourself to write a song. That would be absurd also. But a cousin of mine who's a singer-songwriter also said to me, if you write a song and force yourself to just write a song, and allow yourself that it might be a really bad song, but at least you're just getting back to the process. It's a good way of putting your foot back in and to try and take the pressure away. But otherwise and I'm lucky that I have a variety of jobs. So often, once the tour is over, I find something else to bounce back. So for this album, I took 6 months to do a book of drawings, and suddenly I was drawing all day long. And so picking up the guitar suddenly was like holidays, and there was something with no more pressure whatsoever. And so they're deals that you do with yourself to try and constantly be in motion and never feel like you're doing it because you have to do it.
Are you able to put one of those things in the background when you move on to another project? Or are the wheels kind of spinning on everything all at the same time?
Well, it's true that it all has to do with observation one way or another. And sometimes I guess that the freedom there is when I draw, for example, is that you really don't need anything. I mean, apart from paper and a pen, you're absolutely free. Whereas
it's a little terrifying, though.
It is, but there's something beautiful about just nearly forgetting about yourself. You're just observing, and you're just trying to be as precise as possible in between, especially that I do observations drawing, so it hasn't got to do with imagination that much. It has to do with trying to perfectly log on to something. And so the drawing helps, and often it brings me back to music. And I find, and maybe it's a bit strange, but that it's all absolutely connected. I mean, it gets to an abstraction where, writing a word is a drawing in a strange way, and then a drawing is rhythm, and a rhythm is music. And so I find a way of spinning it always together. And then there's the theatre, which sometimes I go back to either performing. I love doing what they call in France lectures. So I love reading, and I read to people. So that's also something that's very nice, because suddenly I'm just into the passion of an author and just reading to a very sweet audience who likes to have people reading books to them. And so all of that navigates one through the other, I find.
In terms of actually doing music in earnest, though, that's something you came to a little bit later.
Absolutely.
What was the motivation there?
I think that I was raised by my father and mother, obviously, but my father's a director, and he's a writer and director and editor. And when I wanted to become an actress when I was a teenager, he was very worried by the idea that the one thing he associated to actors, even if he loves actors very much, but he was terrified by the idea of people waiting. And always said to me that there was nothing less attractive than people waiting for a phone call, waiting for a role, waiting. So he always said to me, just do stuff that you can do by yourself.
Just in terms of the downtime between
Absolutely.
projects?
And so I used to travel on sets always with a notepad with me, always writing, always reading, and always drawing. And then at one point I picked up a guitar when I was around 20, and I guess to calm down the end of the day when you spent your day saying other people's words and being in someone else's rhythm and being the tool for someone else's creativity, I needed to own myself. So I would lock myself up in my hotel rooms and just do songs, and just for me. And then it took over, and then I would do songs, and other actors or actresses would hear about them and ask me to come and sing in their room. And then the crew would ask me to come and sing at the end of, when we would do parties at the end of the week. And the more it went, the more suddenly music came out of my bedroom.
It's an interesting turn of phrase. It took over.
Yeah. And
So
I didn't see it coming.
there was a point when that just became the thing that you wanted to do.
Absolutely. And then life being I had a child when I was very young, so I was often at home, and again playing the guitar and writing songs, and then doing less and less movies, doing modeling, which helped me to survive in an economic point of view, which gave me even more time. Without realizing, suddenly when I was 27, I realized that I was spending all my days doing music and drawing, and that when my agent would call to go to a casting, I would start lying and saying that I couldn't because I had other stuff to do. And then one day a producer knocked on my door because he'd heard that I was doing songs. For a couple of years, he came and listened to the songs once every month and then once every week. And at the end of 2 years, he managed to drag me in a studio, and I recorded my first demos. And then, weirdly enough, that was it. That was suddenly my life.
Does it lose some of that initial pleasure when it becomes your profession?
Actually, not in the sense that it's true that drawing you can do by yourself, and if people are into it or not is very secondary. It doesn't really count that much. Music is a strange thing because it's true that there is a limit to writing songs just for yourself. It has to do with generosity, and it has to do with being heard. I guess maybe like movies, directors want their movies to be seen. Otherwise it kind of takes a bit of the thrill away. So actually to have an audience now, and to have an expectation from the audience, and to have people in the street when I'm not releasing an album saying, when's the album coming out? When's the next album coming out? Is actually really, really nice. And it can be a motivation. It's not the only motivation, but no, I'm very glad that there's an excitement on front.
Did the performative aspect come naturally to you? I mean, obviously, you've been on stage quite a bit, but not just playing music, but playing your own songs is very different. And you're vulnerable in a way that you aren't with acting because, as you said, these are your own words and thoughts and feelings. Yeah,
really. I'm not a good example in music because all of this was very, very strange. When I released the first single, I thought, being very French, that's done and over with. They will either not care
sort of an existential...
Yeah, I thought, okay, the album's there. I'll be able to tell my grandkids that I did an album once, and end of story. And then, funny enough, the press and the French music industry were very cautious because there had been many actresses / models bringing out albums that didn't work out well. People kind of waited to see what would happen. And the luck was that in 2 weeks, the album went gold because actual people were buying it and not Parisians or not kind of the industry or that kind of aspect. So no one had planned that I would go touring. Everyone was kind of waiting. It was a bit like this French game of, holding chins and seeing who's the first to react. So suddenly after a month, I was being played on the radio because the audience would call up the radio saying, we want to hear Lou's songs. And so very quickly, they said, well, okay, let's find a venue. The album had been out for about 2 months. And so the first venue was a little place called La Flèche d'Or, which is 300 or 400 seats. Well, not seats, standing, actually. And the first gig in my life was filled up. And when I got on stage wondering what the hell I was doing there, the audience already knew the lyrics and people were singing along. So suddenly it didn't feel like having to start, in bars and pubs and trying to get someone to listen to you. I had 400 people just waiting who were already there to kind of support me in a way. So then just dates kept on adding and it was a very royal road in a strange way.
Those early struggle days that most musicians have, that's where you learn to be a performer.
I guess in all of the struggle as an actress, I did 2 years of touring, doing a strange one-woman show, which was hard and where I didn't have an audience and where I had to fight every night. And so for sure that all of that helped me to be able to be on stage, that's for sure, because my band were quite impressed just by the fact that I could have a relation to the audience. But that came from the theatre for sure. And it was actually much more relaxing for me to go on stage with my songs that I could potentially destroy, as opposed to the year before being on stage with a Samuel Beckett play, where there you get very worried at the idea of, screwing up Beckett, whereas screwing up my own songs, I can live with that.
The external expectations perhaps weren't there. It sounds like there was some suggestion that it almost might be a novelty act, you coming in as an actress and a model. How seriously did you take it on that first record, going from, playing in your bedroom to recording an album? Was this something that you thought could be a career for you?
Well, it was very strange because I guess that it was a very good life lesson in the sense that since I was 15, I've never been a great planner, but I wanted the roles, that I went for, and I wanted to be an actress and I wanted to be a theatre actress, and the music, I didn't see it coming, and in a way I put on a persona to be an actress, whereas the music came from the most honest, truthful and broken side of me. It came from a very, very intimate side.
What do you mean by broken? It's
an album that I wrote not ever thinking that it would ever be heard. There were songs that I would write at home because
there were things you revealed that you wouldn't have.
Yeah. And it was survival. It was the most precious thing apart from my child. It was the most precious thing about me, and it came as a great surprise that, it's like sending out intentions and none of them work out. And the one thing on which you put no intention whatsoever, where you're so tired by life. I was, at 30 years old in this weird industry of women. You're an old actress at 30, and if you haven't made it at 30, you're out. You're a very old model at 30. So I was a granny. It was over for me. All my careers were dead, and that's where the songs were coming from. It was coming from a place where I was just going to go and live in the countryside, and I was out and disposable in a way. So when suddenly that's what revealed me, and that suddenly that became the thing that people loved me for or wanted me to be doing, it's a very weird kind of Buddhist lesson that, it's what you do without thinking, and what you do that is the most honest, and what you do not planning a result. That is maybe going to be the one thing that you were meant to be, in a way.
So you go back into the studio and the math changes on that quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot more expectations. How does that impact your relationship to the songwriting and to the album production?
Well, for the second album, it was a strange thing because, of course, for any musician, people are obsessed by the second album. You get this weird thing of everyone saying, oh, and now it's the second album.
You get your whole life to do the first one, and then you get a year or two to do the second.
Exactly. And that the first one was such a big success, which is also very frightening, where you think, well, from there on, it can only go down the hill from now.
Sure. And how much do I try to recreate the magic of the first one?
Absolutely. So on that, what's lucky is that because I've done many other businesses for a long time, I've got a good instinct to know how to fight with me. The rest of the world, I don't really care. But I knew that when people were expecting the biggest hit on the first album was a song called I See You. And I knew that everyone was waiting for I See You too. I could feel it. And I thought, this is never going to happen. And I'm never even going to go there. So because in France, suddenly I felt like something that had, like someone who suddenly had a freedom to record with any producer I wanted to, and to be able to work with anyone I wanted to. Well, of course, I had the good instinct to have the desire to work with a Canadian producer called Kirk from Timbre, who was the only guy of the list that I contacted who said no. And I thought, right, that's the one. I'm going to have to go.
Let's back up. So they roll out the red carpet for the second one because the first one is doing well. So you just sit down and compile a list of people that you want to work with?
The label does.
Okay.
And I was listening to Timbre all the time. And I thought, why am I listening to a list of producers when in fact there is one album and one vinyl that I've been listening to for the last 6 months, and there is a sound in there that I really love.
What is the sound?
It was a very, very strange, physical, out of time, a slightly crooner landscape. It felt like a landscape. It felt like Californian music has a tiny bit too much sunshine for me. There's landscape, but a tiny bit too much sunshine. Canadian music has the landscape, the forest, the loneliness, and a little less sunshine, I guess.
Sure, a little seasonal depression.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on top of it, he was very mysterious. I had seen him on stage and you could barely see his face, and I didn't know much about him. And all the little information I had was that he was never going to say yes. And on top of it, still am, signed with a major, with Universal, and that in no way was he ever going to work with someone who was a French celebrity signed on a major, and I thought, that's what I want to see. Can the music open that door if we take away all of the information he has on me? And he was a trickster. So he said, well, actually, the only moment where I could eventually see you, because I Skyped him, and he was very spooky. He put the camera against a blank wall and I couldn't see his face, and I thought, okay. And he said, I can only see you between Christmas and the New Year in Montreal. And I thought, okay. And he said, and of course, if you plan to come with all your team and whatever, I don't want to see your team or anyone, and I know you won't have the guts to do that. And I said,
sounds like a kidnapping plot.
Yeah, absolutely.
meet me in the forest.
Absolutely. And I thought, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I took my guitar by myself, my book of songs, jumped on a plane. He came to pick me up at the Montreal airport. He looked like a psychopath. He had a pickup with strange sounds at the back, and I nervously giggled saying, are there dead people at the back of the truck? And he gave me a very strange smile and took me to a wonderful studio on Van Horn called Hotel to Tango. I met with his band, and for 4 days he tested me, saying, sing your songs. And he would say, no, that one, maybe, that one, I don't know. And after 2 days, we started jamming all together. And by the 4th day, whether he wanted it or not, I knew that it was him. That was exactly the sound that I wanted.
A few days in, you're not entirely sure whether this thing is actually going to get made, it sounds like.
No, but I knew that if there was an album, it was going to be with him, whether he wanted it or not. The idea was, how was I going to convince him that it was a good idea? And so I thought I mustn't give him any time to think, actually. So I rebooked a plane for the 4th or 5th of January, and we redid a session of 5 days, rebooked straight away another session of 5 days. And by the end of those 15 days, I knew I had the album.
Was he weeding out a lot of what you had written?
He was, I always come up with, I guess, 25, 30 songs, knowing that I like making albums with only 11 or 12. So I knew that it was fine if he was going to trim stuff away, and actually motivated me to write a couple more songs while I was over there. So we had the songs by the start of January. We had nearly all the songs.
How bare bones is it when you enter the studio?
I've got the melody and the kind of rhythmic guitar section, the highways there, the lyrics are there, and the melodies there. Then all the kind of movements around. I know when I want it to get musical in a way, when there's moments where I don't want to sing and I want it to go somewhere. And so that he took over with his band, and it was lovely because we recorded everything live.
So you can't be precious about it. You expect that going into it, these things are going to be changed.
Yeah. And some things, that's exactly why you go there, because that's what collaboration is about. There's many things where you have the instinct to know that it's good to be shaken. It's good for it to be sometimes broken apart, to be, rebuilt. And sometimes you know that you don't want the person to touch it. And so there were 2 songs that he changed too much and that I didn't want to change that much. So I went back to Paris and I recorded them by myself and kept them that way.
Do you feel like it had an impact on yourself and your songwriting outside of being that specific period?
For sure, because I think I needed that validation from myself. I needed to see if I could meet up with another scene also, and because I love the Montreal scene, and there's there's music over there that I really, really like. So Patrick Watson does a music that I really like. There's loads of people, Larsa, who I adore. There's a sound in common with all those people, and that was the gang I wanted to be part of, in a way. That was the musical family I wanted to be part of.
Is Is it something that exists in France, in Paris? And is there a similar scene, or are you kind of a part of any of the music over there?
Not really, because it's in France it's more complicated because it becomes very quickly professional, and there's an idea which is that we're so judgmental. And we're so hard on ourselves, which foreigners tend to take personally. When in fact it's not. As soon our kids go to school, and by the age of 5, you have grades, and very harsh grades. It's 0 out of 20, and I've had teachers who would even give you a -4 out of 20. I mean, it goes that far to really make you feel judged all the time. So people tend to say, oh, I don't play the piano, and if they say that, and you say, oh, come on, they go, no, really not, and you say, oh, come on. Most of the time it means they've done 16 years of conservatoire.
They sit down, play Chopin,
exactly, exactly. There's no in between. It doesn't go with it doesn't go with family music. What I love, and that's where I'm very English, is that and I think it's the same in America or in Canada, there's an instrument in the house and you're allowed to play it. And the point of playing music is to sing along and be all together. I mean, that's why we haven't got many karaokes in France, Or you're going to tear the house down, or you're never going to even try to sing because you need to be perfect. Everything needs to be perfect. So that means we've got professionals who already have a band. We actually have very few bands. Most of them are singer-songwriters who have a backing band, who are very professional musicians, who are studio musicians. And so you don't get the sense of an actual scene. There's some gangs, and most of them are independent French singer-songwriters. And I've got many friends that are that way and who manage to tour by themselves and who have a congregations of friends. But there isn't an actual scene in that sense.
So when you did start playing for yourself, did it take a while before you were confident enough to show it to people, to play for people?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For that reason?
Absolutely. And that's why I would do it like a joke in a way of doing it when people were drunk, or doing it like a kind of like, oh, don't worry me, I'll just, sing in the back. And
these weren't necessarily joyful songs that you were playing.
Certainly not.
Yeah. You would It
depended. I had a very funny song that people loved, which was a song about the fact that my dog was better than my boyfriend. And it took some time in the song for you to realize that I was talking about a dog, and people would bark along. And that was a song that I actually sang when I went to Cuba once, and I explained the song to many Cuban women. I had a translator, and when they got it, I was saying, the perro es mejor than the boyfriend, and they all clapped and cheered along and started barking in Cuban one way or another. And so there were some songs that were remotely happy, I guess, or at least that you could sing along to. But it was more girls. I had a gang of girls who would say, oh, please sing that song about you waiting all night, or oh, can you please sing that song? So it was a kind of sad at the end of the dinner kind of thing.
So the first show you play it's well attended and people are singing along, and then you come to a country like the States where you're less of a known quantity. Is that enjoyable to have to feel like you have to win an entirely new group of people over?
Absolutely. I love that, because that's part of the fun and the pleasure. There's something complicated about being known for many, many things. You don't know to what extent people actually are able to have a clear view of your music in a way. That's why as soon as I perform in other countries, I'm always very happy about it, and to have to try and start again. The first gigs that I did in America were by myself on a guitar to do tiny showcases and things like that. And it was terrifying. For sure, terrifying. And at the same time, I think what's beautiful is that music, or that kind of music, I guess, or drawing or performing, the audience understands how fragile it is, and most of the time are extremely generous about it. I mean, it's rare to go and pay $10 to go and see a gig and just, scream in the back for an hour. Hopefully. I'm always worried that
you'd be surprised.
Exactly. I'm always worried that someone might, and also because it's quite mad, what I do, in the sense that it's so bare. People are kind of, curious about it. When I did my first round of festivals, I remember when I would sing songs by myself on the guitar. When you have just before you Madness, the band, and just after Jamiroquai, and that suddenly you're the mad girl going with a guitar to sing I See You, I can swear that you got 40,000 people looking at you going, what? And funnily enough, people are moved, I guess, by the madness of it all.
So to speak.
Yeah.
I'm always really impressed by people out there with the guitar because it's so much harder, versus like a 9-piece ska band or,
Absolutely.
sort of a funk rock band. It's so much harder to distinguish yourself.
Very hard.
The songs really kind of have to speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And you have to grow yourself in a way that suddenly your songs and yourself take up some space, hopefully.
Does the do the monologues, does the acting, does the theater come into play? Are you an entertainer at all between songs?
Entertainer would be a big word, but
you speak at least a little bit.
Yes,
on
I do. No, I speak a lot, and I guess that the thrill for me is that after years of theatre, you always have what they call the fourth wall in the theatre. You're not allowed to look at the
engage,
audience.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to see them. What a thrill for me now to be able to stare at people and see what's going on. So it's nearly impossible when you hear someone sneeze not to say bless you, for example. There's a great pleasure in that, or to say cheers when you see someone. I mean, there's something, and also I guess that for us all to be able to relax in between songs that sometimes are a bit intense, there's something lovely about showing that. I mean, I think like everyone who's very aware of the tragedy of life, I can be quite funny. Like all tragedy and humor are often linked, I find.
Did it come out naturally in English when you were using this as a form of catharsis, as almost therapy, airing your grievances? The songs just came out in English?
They did, because for sure that the music that I was always turned on by was Anglo-Saxon music, I guess. That at home, I was raised by my English mum, where funnily enough the French are, and I do love the French, don't get me wrong, by pointing out all of our dark sides, but funnily enough, French people are so bad with English that it became a secret language with my mum. So we could talk in bars and cafes and no one would ever know what we were talking about because it was that secret language. And with my son, it's been our secret language too. And so it's linked to intimacy in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think English is just so pervasive across the world that in a lot of cultures there's almost a point of pride to not speaking it.
Yes, yeah, for sure, that people are very happy. And on top of it, French language is absolutely beautiful, and we've got wonderful authors and we've got wonderful music with authors. It's more poetry with music in France.
It's always kind of a grass is greener situation, but we tend to think of French as being a more beautiful lyrical language that could perhaps lend itself better to music in that way.
Well, there's good points and bad points about it. For example, it's a very hard language to actually sing. People talk it more than they sing. And if you look at the opera, for example, you've got many operas in Italian, many operas in German, very few in French, because the way the words are set up, we finish our sentences by going down. We're always closing the meaning and closing literally the vibration of words. So that's why people who sing French the best, or who actually sing it mostly, are Canadian singers who, funny enough, I think have the music of the American language and use the French words. That's why Céline Dion can powerfully sing French. Otherwise, you won't find many French people who actually sing in French. They talk in French. You can rap in French. You can. Yeah, it's more like poetry. And when you think of Jacques Brel, or when you think of Dutronc, or when you think of Gainsbourg, or when you think of Brassens, they're not actually singing it because it's nearly impossible to sing. And whereas English is extremely singable, especially pop. There's something where the sounds are rounder and you can stretch them in a way where French words, there's such a rhythm in it that you would have a hard time stretching words without it becoming just gibberish in a way. And on top of it, what I love about writing in English is that in French, we're obsessed by gender. So you would find yourself in a hard situation to try and put two sentences in a row without denouncing the fact that you're a woman or a man, and denouncing the fact that you're addressing a woman or a man. What I love about English is that you can do 3 minutes of a song where whether you're a boy or a girl, it's not going to change much.
Sure, or if it's a dog or a boyfriend.
Absolutely, which I find wonderful.
So it makes it a little more universally accessible in that people can kind of project their own ideas onto it.
And mysterious.
Yeah.
which is what I like. I like the idea that I can sing about something extremely specific, which is funny how most people think that songs are love songs. And I can have songs about people in my family where it's got nothing to do with a love song and people hear them.
But you're comfortable talking about them. And when people ask you questions about them specifically, you'll answer them.
I will to a certain degree because what I love the most, and when I do promotion, that's what cracks me up, is to, if I do 15 interviews in the day, it's really funny what I hear because...
People's personal interpretations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Songs are like mirrors in a way. People see themselves in them. And so sometimes I have the most crazy visions of people who say stuff and you really don't want to bring them back to what it really was about, because that's what I love so much about music and so much about literature, that it is nearly a conversation between two people. You have to be active when you listen to a song. You project something on it. The same when, even when you're reading Proust, even if he does 4 pages to describe a specific face, we will not see the same face, both of us. And that's the magic that I love, that sometimes moves me more than in movies, for example, where you're actually stuck with the real people, or in the theatre. In literature and in music, you can fantasize whatever you want, even to the extent of hearing words that are not the actual words. When I was a little girl, because I'm called Lou, I heard, when I was very small and I guess extremely an egomaniac and delusional, I thought that every song was about me because I kept on hearing Lou everywhere. Each time there was you, I would hear Lou. So suddenly it's all over Baby Lou. And nearly all of the Beatles was written for me when I was a little girl.
Love Me Lou.
Exactly. And I was like, wow, that's insane. All of these songs about me, And
well, that sort of those qualities are probably useful when you're first going into acting and modeling, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
With two parents who were very much in the public eye, did they try to dissuade you? Obviously, they've both seen the downsides to all of these fields. Did they try to steer you in a different direction?
My father, who's got a good instinct, when I started wanting to be an actress, made me go for a very harsh casting to do one of his movies. And when I got the role, decided to change the dialogue the night before, made it into a very, very long monologue that I learnt all night long. I think I was 9 or 10 years old.
It's like having your father as like a soccer coach.
Exactly.
He's going to push you harder than the other kids.
Exactly. And he got me on set the next day and put the camera 4 centimeters away from my face. The whole crew was around. I missed my mark the first time. Then the second time I got confused in the words, and he stood up and took me by the collar and in front of everyone said, in a very rude French way, "Get your gear and get the hell out of here. You're not capable of being an actress." So that was first movie. Then 3 years later I tried again. He wouldn't.
3 years of you just not going back out at all?
No. And
how old were you at the time?
At the time, so the first time I was 9, and the
Okay.
second time I was 13 and or 14, I think. And I got to the casting. He refused to have me do the lines, and I managed to seduce the casting director in at least doing a tape of me so that he would show my father.
There are other directors out there, right?
But I had the good instinct. He's known to be the harshest one.
I see.
And to be the hardest one. And I wanted to try with, obviously with him. And so I got the role, except he told me only 2 weeks before the movie, saying, "So what are you doing this summer apart from doing that movie?" And that's how I learned I was doing it. And then after 3 weeks of being in the set and of him screaming against me and having, by the end, the whole crew on my side. And it was a very long scene. He's known to do tedious long scene. So it was a 9-minute scene with 10 pages of dialogue. And he said, "You come in, you're pissed off. In the middle, you burst into tears. And at the end, you leave laughing. Moteur, camera rolling." So I thought, you bloody... and managed to do it and got half of the film crew in tears. And he didn't even say a word. He said passable, which in French means, we'll move on. You don't know if it's good or if it's bad. And at the end of the film said, "So you really want to do this job?" And he said, "I've tried every trick in the book to get you disgusted by it. So good luck."
Yeah.
And that's how I started working with other directors.
So that was 12 or 13 years old. And you you left school relatively early, right,
Yeah.
to pursue it
Yeah.
full time. So
Yeah.
that there was what, a 3-year
Well,
gap
after his
that?
after his movie, I did another movie a couple of months later that was an enormous success in France. So suddenly I got many propositions, and by the age of 15 and a half, I was doing movies back to back.
By that point, after everything had been thrown at you, they were supportive of the idea of you leaving school and really just diving.
He wasn't, but he was funny when
he didn't dissuade you.
No, but as soon as I got my first check from a movie, he said, "So are you intending not to do studies?" And I said, "No, I think I want to be an actress." And he said, "Well, pack your stuff and leave then." And which I did. And he has a good ego, and he knows me, and he knows I've got one. And at the door, he said, "You'll never make it. You'll come back here." And of course, I never came back.
I know, fortunately, in a position where you don't have to choose one, but do you primarily think of yourself as a musician?
I think that if I had to choose, I do believe that it took me a long time to accept that we only live once, and if we get to do as many things as we want to do, that's a good thing, and it's a good thing for ourselves. And then if other people like it or not, that's another question. But it's out of my hands in a way. But the job that does, I guess, go through all of the others is music, in the sense that it goes with my pleasure of literature, my pleasure of words that I can find in the theatre. It goes through the pleasure of being on stage and performing like one would in the theatre. It goes with the idea of embracing a persona, which has to do with movies, and so in a way, and you do meet the public, and you are able to collaborate with people who take you further. So all of that combined, it is what I love in all of the different jobs that I do. So suddenly it's if someone for an awful reason said you're only allowed to do one thing from now on, then yes, it would be to write and sing.
It's interesting, at the beginning of the conversation, you were framing it in terms of this 3-year cycle. So it does sound like the plan is to keep doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Although you did say that the schedule is sort of switching up on the next one. Is that right?
Now I shall be performing past the festivals and till December. So, and what's nice is to also, I think that all of the industries are changing a lot, and that there's new ways of doing this. And I know that will I be touring then by myself and writing at the same time, for example, or writing songs that I can perform in a local bar or pub to see how they work before going to record them. I mean, all of those ideas are now coming up. I think that that many artists are moving out of this kind of, recording, promoting, touring, recording, promoting, touring. I think we can switch it around and have a bit more fun with it now.
You worked with multiple producers on the last record. Yeah. Obviously, you liked the process of working with a single producer and the way that shaped that one. So why switch it up in this way? Because
I realized that when you work with one producer, it becomes a little bit like a movie, in the sense that we all project stuff on each other. And when you work with one producer, you realize that a producer does project something on you. And when I recorded the first album, the songs were exactly the way I write them. But the first producer, Etienne Dao, I think fantasized me as a kind of old soul singer, or maybe a kind of, a vintage folky American girl.
I saw people comparing you to Nina Simone, which is a pretty hard thing to live up to on your first record.
That's very hard. But people were, there was something, he used to compare the kind of broken voice to a Karen Dalton and people like that. So I think he fantasized that. When I worked with Taylor, I think he fantasized me more as a kind of blues, a kind of dark, a mixture of blues and maybe a kind of Nico.
I mean, it's an interesting way to put it, sort of fantasize you as something as though you're almost someone else's muse, but this is your work and you want these to be your songs. Do you feel, having done this for as long as you have, that you have that sort of defined quality, that you're able to steer that, or how much of it is still in the hands of the producers to kind of shape the sound?
Well, it's a half and a half, because they haven't got a choice, in the sense that since the songs are already written and the melody's already there, it's really the kind of finishing touch in a way. It's like, it's really the finishing touch. But that's what we see when we listen to singer-songwriters, for example. You recognize the work of different producers, because they do tend to bring you somewhere, and to kind of put a varnish on it all. So most of it resembles you. I mean, when I sing with a guitar by myself songs from the first or the second album, you can hear that they're already there and they're very close to me. But then the orchestration, I guess, or the sound of the elements around you are fantasized by a producer, and especially for my first album, because I had never done that. So I didn't find myself in a position where I could say like, oh no, I think it would sound better, on a Fender as opposed to, that. I had no idea. So I would, as long as it sounded all right and that I didn't feel like it was cheating my music, I was pretty giddy and happy that someone would take it somewhere and make a full orchestration with it. Second album, Taylor took it somewhere else, where I think he saw me, and I must have been at the time in a darker zone. So he saw me, I think, really as a kind of nearly Nico-esque kind of dramatic by herself on a guitar.
I have to ask you, having been a fan of hers for a long time, what a cat power brings to the table.
Well, for the third one, that was the thing where I thought, how do I start off in a position that means that I will, in a way, force producers to work in a direction that I'm a bit more. So for that one, I started off by recording everything with just drums and vocals, and then adding just a tiny bit of electric guitar to kind of go nearly against my vocals, and then send that to producers to work with. There was one song that I loved exactly as it was, and it was It's You, that was with an acoustic guitar and the voice, and I thought, I don't want this song to be in the hands of any producers, because it resembles the song Weekend a Baby on the second album, which Taylor had tried to produce and Etienne Dao had tried to produce, and neither of them managed, because I think it was just pretty in the way that it was just a voice and a guitar. Because the third album was starting to be very colourful and very produced one way or another, I thought, It's You will never hold up in the middle of this. Why would it be there if it's just a voice and guitar? And I thought, aha, if I find someone to sing it with me, then suddenly it comes through a royal door of being allowed to stand in the middle of all of the others, and maybe even be a revealer of the others by being exactly how songs start off, by being just guitar and voice. And so I thought I would like it to be a girl, because I'd never done a duo with anyone, and I thought I would like to start with a girl. First girl I thought about was Cat Power, and so I sent her an email and sent her the song, and to my great pride and happiness, she answered, and she was finishing her album, starting her tour, had no time to spare. And so I told her, I said, well, listen to the song and then you'll see if you find the time or not. And she heard the song and was very thrilled by it, which I was very proud and about. And so I sent her the stems, I sent her the Pro Tool session, and she recorded in California by herself, and she recorded a harmonica, and she recorded a bit of a piano, and had this wonderful idea, which proves that sometimes it's better not to be around and not to be telling people what to do. I thought we would sing it like a duo. I thought she would take away some of the moments where I was singing to sing in herself, and in fact she had this wonderful idea of becoming 20 women around me who keep on, gliding above, below, and going right through me. And she sent me that session back, and I thought, that's it. It worked. It can be part of the album now.
So it sounds like you're in a much better place now mentally than you were when you first started writing what became that first album.
Well, it's always nice to suddenly, you need to, and it's quite normal, you need to start off by being an apprentice one way or another. And I
just mean emotionally, you were sort of in a rough transitory spot.
But it all goes together.
Yeah.
As soon as you learn a craft and you start to enjoy that and know that you're able to talk about it and find producers and know why you're finding them and telling them what you want them to do and become, especially being a woman, it's quite fun when you're working with men all the time to suddenly have the guts to say, I don't like those drums, which took some time to be able to say. And all of this puts you in a position of empowerment where, of course, it has an effect on your personal life and the other way too. So the personal life is better because the professional life is better, and the professional life is better because the personal life is better. It's all a circle.
That was Lou Doillon. Her new record, Soliloquy, is out now on Universal. Really wonderful conversation. Thanks so much to her for coming into my office and taking the time to do that. Thanks to you guys, as always, for listening to the program. If you like the show, there are a number of ways to support us. You can rate and review us on iTunes, Google Podcasts. We're on Spotify and YouTube now. Like us on Facebook. If you have any feedback, it's rylcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Tumblr. That's rylcast.tumblr.com. That is the first and best place to get all of your RIYL related information. And that's about all we got for this week, so stick around because we are going to be back in a few days with another episode of RIYL.